"Ang the parking ticket that knew more than I did." I didn't go looking for proof. Proof sat up and raised its hand. I was fishing a pen from the glove box when the parking ticket slipped out, a skinny yellow strip with a bar code and the smugness of bureaucracies that never apologize. Time in, 0047. Time out, 0139. Garage, Harbor Center, Level 6. Someone had folded it twice and tucked it beside the manual like a secret that wanted to rehearse being found. The car is technically ours. The glove box is technically mine. Nina had driven the night before, coming home with that loosened shoulders look she gets after a long day has finally agreed to end. We'd eaten toast at 1 in the morning, the good jam like a bribe, and she'd kissed me with a tenderness that hits like thunder after too much blue sky. I hadn't asked where she'd been because the kiss answered more questions than words would have. Now the ticket said, Harbor Center between today and tomorrow, on a level of concrete that pretends it's sky. I set the pen on the console and stared at the strip long enough to memorize its pessimism. There's a typeface cities use when they want to convince you there are rules. I texted Nina a harmless sentence. "Need anything for dinner?" She wrote back. "Maybe Basil." The ordinary courage of Basil. I slid the ticket back where I'd found it and drove to the store with a shopping list that wanted to be a prayer. At home, Nina was at the sink unwinding a day out of her wrists. She glanced over her shoulder with the tired brightness of someone who still knows how to pick a room and light it from inside. "You're early," she said. "I found parking," I said. We cooked like people who prefer proof of heat to the idea of it, garlic first, then tomatoes, the basil late so it keeps its vanity. She told me about a client who wanted a mural that said community without letting anyone with a stroller complain about color. I told her about a director who had decided rain should sound kinder. When we ate, we did the small, brave things. Looked too long, didn't look away. Later in bed, she reached for me and I let my body lead the conversation. There's a kind of accuracy desire can have when it remembers what it's for. She pressed her mouth under my jaw and I felt the simple old truth of us, the one I trust more than the invention called certainty. We stopped before we invented a reason to pretend this was a fix. We slept with our knees touching like a code. In the morning, I took the ticket from the glove box again, as if it might have changed while we slept. I know that garage. It belongs to a cluster of buildings that insist they're restaurants, a gym that thinks it's a church, and a hotel too proud of its rooftop bar. I told myself gym as I put on a jacket. I told myself gym as I walked. I told myself gym as the elevator smelled like the belts of a machine running without anyone on it. Level 6 was an echo made of paint. I stood where the ticket said the car had been and looked at a concrete view you build when you can't afford the river. Across the street, the hotel sat with its shoulders squared, glass and opinions. On its roof, a few small figures moved with the ease of people who believe their names belong to the skyline. I didn't wait for a dramatic cue. Drama is for rooms where other people will clap. Back on the street, I passed a florist with too many peonies for a Wednesday and a bar where the stools learn everyone's posture by midnight. I turned my phone over in my hand until the screen gave me something useful, the calendar. Studio late, Nina had written last night, then a second block called offsite, an hour that overlapped midnight. Offsite is a word that means somewhere not yours. I work with sound. I spend afternoons making footsteps sound like apologies or courage. Today I made a decision sound like itself. I texted, "Harbor Center is out of Basil. Want me to try another store?" It was a stupid joke and an honest arrow. 3 dots appeared, erased themselves, returned. "I'll grab some at lunch," she wrote. I didn't go back to the garage that day. I went to work and removed a squeak from a hinge that should have been confident and placed a low hum under a kitchen scene so the house would feel like it had a weather. Around 5, my phone buzzed with a ride receipt from our shared account. "Thanks for riding," the cheerful machine said. "Route, studio to home. Time, 17:42, 17:59. Tip, generous but not flirtatious. Evidence that people go where they say they'll go more often than stories do." When Nina came in, she had basil and something that wasn't apology and wasn't permission, a readiness. She set the bunch on the counter, then set her palms beside it like a person calming a nervous horse. "You're thinking loudly," she said. "I found a ticket," I said, and placed it between us the way you put down a photograph you both remember taking. "Harbor Center, after midnight." She looked at it the way you look at a senior photo of a younger, worse version of yourself. Her jaw did the thing it does when she's choosing, and then she stepped toward me and made us use the voice I trust most. "Kitchen or the small room?" she asked. "Kitchen," I said. "We'll eat the rules afterward." She ran a thumb along the strip, as if scanning it for grace. "I walked to the water because the day had moved in too many straight lines," she said. "I got cold, so I went up to the roof to pretend a breeze is a personality. You know how the harbor has that view where the river pretends it's useful? I wanted that." "And the time," I said, "because hours are mean when they want to be." "I met someone," she said. "From the old job, the type of man who treats rooms like auditions." She glanced at me to let the sentence land before it hurt anyone. "We had a drink. I told him he was a good reason to practice not doing anything I'd hate to tell you. I kissed him once. It tasted like metal and an idea I don't actually believe in. Then I left. I drove home thinking I'd be noble and tell you everything like a press release. I wasn't noble. I fed you toast and kissed you carefully, and put the ticket where you would find it eventually, because the part of me that believes in both of us is a weak strategist and a good person. There are questions that arrive in a man's mouth already loud. I kept mine gentle so the room would stay ours. Do you want him? I want what he thinks I am when I'm near him, she said. But that version of me pays rent here. We ate the basil with pasta, and the basil tasted like basil and not like a metaphor. Then she touched my wrist and said, "I don't want to ruin this with nobility. Do you want me?" "Yes," I said like a map. She led me to the small room with the ugly lamp, and we kissed like people who intend to keep what they already have. It wasn't fireworks. It was accuracy. Her breath changed under my mouth, and the old electricity arrived without pretending it was a rescue. She slid her hand into the back of my hair, and I remembered the precise pressure that turns my name into a compass. We stopped before the edge that turns yes into an attempt to prove something. We lay there and let skin be the answer it is, when no one asks it to solve a riddle. Later, on the back of a takeout menu, we wrote rules. We always write rules when the night has been brave. "If I want a roof, I say roof," she wrote. "If I want a room, I say your name," I wrote. "Jealousy is weather, not law, and if you need a witness that isn't me, tell me why you chose them." She laughed at that and kissed the corner of my mouth and wrote, "You get first refusal on every balcony." For a while, the world minded its manners. We went to work. We came home. We left the ticket on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a lemon so it could be a relic without becoming a scripture. When she needed spark, she said storm, and I did my best to be lightning with good aim. When I needed quiet, I said library, and she put her head under my chin and made time pass nicely. Then we ran into him. Harbor Center again, rude with customers. He was a better jacket than man, a known face to the hostess who thinks knowing is currency. He saw us and performed that small civilized shock men practice in mirrors. "Nina," he said with a politeness that liked itself. He looked at me and chose deference. "Good to meet you properly," he said, and offered a hand calibrated to be firm without announcing anything. "Likewise," I said, "because I'm a better person in public than inside my head." He asked how the mural was going and managed to turn the question into something about opportunity wearing boots. Nina smiled like a person who knows where the exits are. "We're good," she said. "We're learning how to paint in a city that keeps trying to be glass." He laughed, surprised into liking the line, and excused himself with the right amount of grace. When he'd gone, she leaned into me the half-inch that means don't worry, and I didn't. That night we didn't try to be noble. We tried to be specific. In our small room, under the lamp that forgives, she took my face in both hands and said, softly, "Now." I answered carefully and then greedily and then carefully again. She made the sound I will believe in until I die, the one that tells me the room has remembered its name. After, we lay with our feet touching the wall to cool down and laughed because we had done an ordinary thing excellently. A week later, another ticket appeared. Same garage, different hour, 17:08 to 17:33. And I learned not everything yellow is proof. It belonged to me. I had forgotten a lunch meeting I didn't want to remember. I clipped it under the lemon magnet next to the first. 2 strips like lath under plaster, holding the house up. Nina started running by the water on purpose, not to flirt with roofs, but to train for an actual race with a finish line that gives you a banana and a foil blanket. I biked alongside some mornings and we pretended to be those people, the ones who have routines and sleep well. We were bad at it. We liked trying. One evening, the garage sent both of us a "We Miss You" coupon because algorithms are needier than lovers. Nina forwarded it to me with the caption, "I don't." I replied with the lemon emoji and she sent back the house. Spring pushed into the city like a friend who never knocks. We ate outside. We apologized to our Basil for not believing in it sooner. I tuned 3 kitchens for an audio series about couples who stayed and realized it was the first time I hadn't needed to invent any noises. Homes hum when you let them. Months slipped. We went to a wedding at the Harbor Hotel and watched 2 kind people promise their brave, small lives to each other. On the roof, under strings of lights pretending to be stars, Nina pressed her mouth to my ear and said, "I still want roofs." I said, "I know." She said, "I still want you." I said, "I know." And then, because the moon was showing off and the night hadn't learned modesty, me too. We went downstairs before midnight and walked through the garage on purpose, counting squares of light, hands hooked casually into each other in a way that would have embarrassed our younger versions. We stopped at level 6 and looked at nothing until it became something. Our city, our dumb rules, our good lamp waiting, the Basil thinking it was a tree. She kissed me there in the ugliest light in town, and the kiss was ridiculous and loyal. When people ask what saved us, I tell them we were never lost, just temporarily overinterested in the idea of elsewhere. If they insist on a moment, I say it was a lemon magnet on a fridge holding 2 strips of paper that taught us the difference between evidence and story. If they want an act of romance, I tell them about the way she sometimes says "storm" into my mouth, and I sometimes say "library" into her shoulder, and we practice listening like that pays the light bill. The other day, cleaning out the glove box, I found an old map of the city, folded, cracked, wrong in all the new places. I kept it not because I like being lost, but because paper has the decency to admit it doesn't update itself. We update us. We push first, the lock sticks, we turn, we open. When we need a roof, we ask for it by name. When we need a room, we go home. And when a yellow strip appears with the arrogance of proof, we let it audition, and then we decide the role is already taken.